Natasha, over the last several weeks, Facebook has been making numerous announcements about their voter information center, diverting folks to accurate information about voting on Facebook. They announced a while ago they would stop taking new political ads a week before the election. And now this, no political ads after polls close. Is it enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, the horse is already out of the barn. It's 30 days before the election. A lot of the damage has already been done in terms of, the mess and the manipulation that we've seen on the platform. We wrote the company a few weeks ago, along with other concerned investors, asking them to ban all political ads at least a month before the election. But that has not been what's come to pass. And even employees at Facebook asked them to ban political ads a year before the election because of the issues we saw in 2016. So, I think I really think it's the 11th hour. The changes that they have made are necessary. And so we can be grateful that there's some change, but I don't think it's sufficient.
Does that mean that you think on election night, Facebook could still be responsible for the election going haywire?
I mean, I think that's an unavoidable conclusion that Facebook is going to be responsible in this election cycle for misinformation, for hate speech, for fake accounts and manipulation of the platform. I think that's already a foregone conclusion. I do think it's important that they are sort of trying to clean up the mess that they've created, putting these guardrails in place. Again, I think it's necessary, but not sufficient in terms of of what we would expect. I mean, we've been pressing the company since 2016 on election interference, on fake news, on content governance, on all of these things. And the question is, how much pressure does it take for them to sort of hit a threshold and act at this 11th hour? There's been a lot of pressure and they really haven't acted. And in the way that we would hope and expect, in a proactive way. And unfortunately, these issues are really material to investors. And we saw this summer a, hashtag Stop Hate for Profit campaign where 300 major advertisers pulled out ad dollars, which is the bread and butter of the company. And now we're seeing, threats of regulation. And our hope always as investors and as activist investors is that a company acts in its own enlightened self-interest, is proactive, and deals with these issues early and often, and not with this kind of a Band-Aid approach.
We're going to get to the regulatory issues in a moment, but what about banning QAnon, the conspiracy theory movement? Facebook had taken incremental steps to get them off the platform. Now, if you actually go to some of these groups and pages, they are gone for now. Will that make a difference?
Well, I'm glad to see Facebook follow the lead of other social media companies in banning QAnon. But, again, they're doing it sort of at these last moments. And why, months ago wasn't QAnon banned? It feels like kind of this come to Jesus moment for the company. But you really have to wonder when you have a hate group that the FBI, says is a domestic terrorism group, being, finally banned after so much pressure. They're just not stepping up. I mean, we saw in Kenosha, Wisconsin, what happened with this group, the Kenosha Guard, that basically put up a call to arms on the platform to bring action against peaceful protesters. And it was flagged 455 times and was seen by Facebook, and they didn't do anything and they didn't take it down. And then, that group was responsible for the death of 2 people. So, the question is, when it's not really like what's happening now. When is the tide going to turn and the company get proactive, and not when it's already too late? I mean, that's really always been our issue with the company.
So speaking of what's next, the House Antitrust Subcommittee dropping a massive report in which they recommend some pretty dramatic remedies to curb the power of big tech, including Facebook, and new laws that could pave the way for Facebook to be broken up. They claim that Instagram would have grown even bigger without Facebook, and that Facebook considers Instagram and WhatsApp its biggest competition in social media, which might be the very definition of monopoly. How big a risk is this to Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big risk, and I think that members of Congress were right to point out the overconcentration of power. I think we see that with a lot of big tech companies, in particular, having Facebook called out. You can see why that would happen. That they really haven't effectively managed a platform with 2.7 billion users. And because of that, they've made themselves a target, which is unfortunate. This is why we want the company to be more proactive on these issues. I think, if you're really going to deal with overconcentration of power, Facebook should be kind of immediately looking internally about the overconcentration of power within its own structure, which I think would assuage some regulators' concerns. Because right now, between management and Zuckerberg, they really have a chokehold on the shares. They have super voting shares. And so, other investors, mainstream investors, are a minority and just don't have the voice that they do at other companies. It's similar at Google, that same kind of a structure. And, I'd like to see more women, more people of color in positions of power at the company. We've been asking them to add a human and civil rights expert to their board to get some diversity of thought and addressing some of the biggest issues that they're facing as a company. At the same time, I think there's work to do internally. There's also work to do, externally. And I think the way that they've handled Instagram and WhatsApp is regrettable. And one does need to wonder, having smaller, more nimble companies, more innovative companies, would that help solve some of the problems that social media has created? And in fact, that could be a good thing for investors, because when you start to get these behemoths, they hit up against a ceiling of growth, and there's just not the innovation and the growth that you want to see.